Hi, welcome to Jadekind Gaming. My name is Adam, and today I am going to be flipping through and reviewing Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Got this book about a week ago, and I've spent my time since just reading through it. And I'm very pleased. It is the first big rules expansion we've had since Xanathar's, and it includes content from Eberron, from Ravnica, from Theros, a little expansion on some stuff that we saw bits of in the Essentials kit, and even a little from way back in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So it's pulled some things together from a bunch of various sources to present it in one book that also includes some expansions to the rules themselves. Some of which Ranger we've been looking forward to for a while, and so let's dive in here. So I feel like it's the first one that has like a title that they're breaking away. It's not a book about something; it's a cauldron. So that's just a different feel. But yeah, so diving in here, some basic just rule reminders, things that I'm sure come up with questions all the time. And then chapter 1 is character options. Starting with customizing your origin, which is your race. Basically just optional rules for choosing different ability scores, languages, proficiencies than your race. The latter two, I've always kind of done depending on your culture. Ability scores, yeah, I suppose if a player really had like an idea for a character that had to have that, doesn't hurt. It's optional. They'd have to get permission, but it's there. Also, strangely enough, they give you the authority to not have the same personality as described as the race overall in the book, which baffles me to think, wait, did anyone ever feel like they had to play the default personality of like a dwarf if they're playing a dwarf? Because that cannot even comprehend. But yeah, you can have your own personality. It's what personality is. And they do technically have one race in this book, and it is this one right here, Custom Lineage. It is a race with no flavor, but it is just sort of a select these options and make a race of your own. Which is not terrible. Definitely if you want to do something like a quick homebrew race, just, sort of choose a feat that works with it, one of these couple of skills, either skill proficiency or dark vision, what your ability score increases are. There you go. You got a race. So that's a really quick way to do a race that isn't presented anywhere else. They also have little rules and guidelines if after the game has begun you want to train to either change your subclass or skill. Great little guidelines. Then we move into classes, starting with the Artificer. Originally presented in Eberron, Rising from the Last War. They've brought it back here. It is the 13th full class, so it's great to see that it's making its way into a general book instead of just a setting book, for more people to have access to it, and it allows them to include the Armorer, a new subclass that's basically Iron Man. You want to play your fantasy Iron Man. It also has the 3 that were in Eberron. And a few new infusions that generally are armor-based to go with the Iron Man option. And then we get to our other, our normal classes from the PHB. And we see something that, when I saw it, I was like, what? There's optional class features. It's like you can use both, neither of them, but it is Primal Knowledge, 3rd level Barbarian feature, where at 3rd and 10th level you get an additional skill proficiency and Instinctive Pounce. At 7th level you get to move up to half your speed when you enter a rage. just extra abilities to add onto Barbarian. If you thought Barbarian doesn't quite have enough skill options, they're not able to do enough between combats, or at the start of a combat they have trouble, closing that distance to get into the fight, they've put solutions in here. You're not giving anything up. It is just extra stuff. Which I feel is a little bit of a hot fix. Not that I felt there were really issues with the Barbarian as a whole, but I suppose those are things that, yeah, those were some areas where a Barbarian might have trouble. Let's solve the problem. So that confused me, but was interesting. We get some Primal Paths, Path of the Beast, just kind of like a lycanthrope-esh kind of, your monsterish kind of Barbarian. And then Path of Wild Magic, which is basically Wild Magic Sorcerer, but for Barbarians. Then we move on to Bards. With their optional class features, then I got to see theirs are additional spells, which are some from this book, but also just spells from the player's handbook that they're like, let's add these to the Bard's spell list. They work. We could have added them originally. We've changed our mind and decided, let's add them. An optional feature, it's up to you and your Dungeon Master, but nice. New use for the Inspiration Die, and versatility, basically allowing you to replace some things on your levels that give the ability score improvements. Basically just a way to adjust your character if you change your mind about a decision. I'm not going to go through these on every class, but there are things like this for basically every class that that basically add little bits to the class on top of what's already in the player's handbook that you can optionally choose. We get a new Bard College, College of Creation, and College of Eloquence, which I want to say was from Theros, but that's a reprint there. Cleric, again, few optional features, and we get the Order Domain, which would be from Ravnica, and we get Peace and Twilight Domain. So 2 new domains for the Cleric. Druids, I love this one. An option to use, basically, you expend one of your wild shape things to cast Find Familiar, so you can have like a light, familiar, like a light animal companion. Definitely bringing back, while it's not as powerful as a full, beast companion like the Rangers have and is improved on in here, it is at least a pet, which was one of the things I liked about Druids in 3.5, so I'm glad it's there. We get Circle of Spores, which is from Ravnica, and Circle of Stars and Circle of Wildfire, 2 new Druid options. Fighter gets some new fighting styles. They get some new maneuver options for the Battlemaster, and then we get a Psi Warrior, like a Psychic Fighter. So we're starting to see Psychic options, and the Rune Knight, which is kind of like a giant-inspired fighter. And then we get Battlemaster builds, which are ways to combine fighting styles, maneuvers, and feats to make certain builds. So if you have trouble figuring out how to put together your Battlemaster because there are so many maneuver options, this gives you idea for like what kind of fighter do you want to play, and it gives you some things to start with, some things to work towards, to kind of go towards that goal. Our monk gives the Way of Mercy, which is sort of a, through healing or through, putting you out of your misery, they're giving you mercy. Way of the Astral Self, which gives you like psychic powers. Like it feels a little psychic with extra like incorporeal limbs to make attacks with. A weird feel. Paladin, again, more fighting styles. They get the Oath of Glory, which I think was in Theros. Oath of the Watchers. The Ranger has quite a few improvements. The Ranger does get some abilities that replace existing abilities optionally, which means that if you like some of the existing Ranger abilities that they replace, you get to choose which ones you're swapping out. So you have more versatility with the class overall, making them more akin to like the level of choice that the Warlock has, where you're making several different choices, because you, for each of these abilities, get to choose to use the one in here or the one in the player's handbook. I love it. Deft Explorer to replace the Natural Explorer feature. Favored Foe to replace Favorite Enemy, which also still works with Foe Slayer, the capstone. Additional spells, additional fighting options, the ability to use a spellcasting focus for their spells, Primal Awareness to replace Primeval Awareness, basically the versatility feature where you get to change out fighting styles when you get a level that gets an ability score, so if you've made a wrong choice, you can fix it. Nature's Veil to replace Hide in Plain Sight. Not quite as long-lasting, but a lot quicker to do. You don't have to spend 10 minutes setting it up. And then we get our archetypes. Fey Wanderer and Swarm Keeper. Fine. But then we get Beastmaster Companions, which is 3 stat blocks that utilize some features from your character, your proficiency bonus and that kind of thing, to advance them as you go, and that you get to flavor. Like, Beast of the Land, is that a bear or a wolf or a panther or whatever you want it to be? It's just Beast of the Land. It's generic. You flavor it as you want. Beast of the Sea, same with, aquatic creatures. Beast of the Sky with birds, or bats, or whatever. You get to kind of basically customize it. You have a stat block, and you get to flavor it yourself. Wonderful. Fantastic. Really helps with just making it where you can make it your own. Rogue gets the Phantom, which I will read one of their abilities, because whales from the grave, blah blah blah. Immediately after you deal sneak attack damage to a creature on your turn, you can target a second creature that you can see within 30 feet of the first creature, roll half the number of sneak attack dice for your level, rounded up, and the second creature takes necrotic damage equal to the roll's total, as well as the dead sound around them for a moment. Limited times, whatever. A lot of abilities are a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining expended uses at long rest. They use that a lot in this book, which I think is a good way to give you a couple to start, and it automatically increases as you gain levels, so that's great. But that second creature, they did not get a save. You did not have to hit their AC. The only thing that they did was they were too close to somebody else who you were able to sneak up on. They could even see you. You might not be able to sneak up on them, but you snuck up on their friends, so they get hurt. Not a huge fan until I think about using it against my players, in which case I'm like, perhaps the cult that they're going up against is full of phantoms. And then we get the Soul Knife, which, like the Psychic Fighter, this is Psychic Rogue. Quite fun. Sorcerer gets a few new options, couple new metamagic options. Great. And then they get the Aberrant Mind and the Clockwork Soul. The Warlock, long time favorite of mine, just because of the number of options it gets more options. It gets a new Pact Boon option, the Talisman, which is basically an object you can give to someone else so that you could use it to help yourself or to help another party member. Some versatility of changing out options when you get one of those ability score improvement levels. New Eldritch Invocation options, some of which that help with the Talisman, others are for other things. A couple for the Tome that let you, that were in the Unearthed Arcanas, to write names and like teleport people or keep them from dying. The ability to have advantage on con saves to maintain concentration. And as someone, as I said, I like familiars. I like having a pet in D&D, where I don't have to actually take care of it. Just advancements to improve your familiar. Love that. And then we get some otherworldly patrons. The Fathomless, which is whether it's a Kraken or Ancient Sea Elemental or whatever. Like, you have some sort of patron that is from the ocean, and then the genie Love it. Again, more options. 4 different flavors for the 4 different types of genie. And it includes getting their bottle, which you can go into, and it is a 20-foot radius cylinder, 20 feet high, resembles your vessel, so like oil lamp or stoppered bottle or ornate lantern or whatever. The interior is appointed with cushions and low tables and is comfortable temperature. I'm like, as a kid that grew up with iDream of Genie on Nick at Night, I'm like, yes, you get to go into the bottle. Fantastic. And later on you can bring in your friends, but yeah, so that is cool. That is a cool, much like Mordenkainen's A Magnificent Mansion or that kind of thing, or really setting up a portable hole to like be decorated on the inside, instead of just throwing junk in there, like to make it like a space that you go in and like a living space. You have a genie bottle. Love it. And then you get other things, like eventually like a limited wish and stuff. Whatever. Wizards get cantrip formulas. The ability, finish a long rest, consult your formulas in the spellbook, and replace a cantrip with another. So you can kind of change your cantrips just like you can change all your other spells. Cool. Blade Singing, which is from the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, minus the elf restriction and some flavor originally from elves, but others have learned it. And Order of the Scribes, which is a particularly bookish wizard. And I guess I will point out, there are these little boxes all throughout with Tasha's little comments, like, magic is great and all, but have you smelled a book? Just little sarcastic comments and stuff that she makes throughout. Then we get new feats, several of which are things like Artificer, Initiate, and Eldritch Adept that let you get abilities, partial abilities or spells from certain classes. Then there's ones like Chef that just make cooking utensils useful. There's one for each damage type, like Crusher for bludgeoning, to basically, if you're specializing in one of those 3 primary damage types, get some benefits with it. Both normal on regular attacks as well as on crits, even further. Then there's things like Fey Touch that give you a couple spell options, basically like Magic Initiate, but different flavor, some extra stuff with them, but with less overall choice. Again, like Meta Magic Adept to get you some Sorcerer powers. Poisoner to be, if you want to play someone that uses poison, great way for that. Shadow Touched is another like the Fey Touched. Slasher and Piercer for slashing and piercing damage. Telekinetic and Telepathic to add a little more psychic flavor, as we have a couple of psychic classes in here. And then we move on to group patrons, which is basically based on the rules from Eberron Rising from the Last War. There were group patrons in there, but with a different list. Academy, Ancient Being, Aristocrat, Criminal Syndicate, Guild, Military Force, Religious Order, and Sovereign. Many of the overall suggestions from Eberron, not like the specific from the world, but the ways to generalize them, fall underneath one of these lists. So these are broader categories with more options. Patrons still, assist a group, give perks and assignments. For example, Academy, which could be, like a boarding school, an arcane enclave, a secret monastery, an elite institute, a vault of secrets, or a museum of dreams. Just some options of different types of academies. Because it could be like a wizard school, but it could just be like a normal school. You work for some sort, that, does research in other things, or, collects, artifacts of the past and teaches about history or whatever. There are varieties of different kinds of academies. You get perks, things like compensation, documentation, research, resources, and training, all available through academies. So here are things like, because you work for an academy, patron basically being saying like the whole party works for an organization, a person, someone that is telling them what adventures to go out and do. you get different contexts, like who are you getting your missions from at the academy? Is it, some celebrated instructor, a, distant observer? Who's telling, who are you having contact with while at the academy? Who's telling you what to do? Where are you getting information, etc.? They give a few options for that. Academy Factorums, which is basically saying, what are you doing? Why are you there? Are you a student, groundskeeper, professor, researcher, financier, expert speaker? And then for each of those, what are some good backgrounds for that? And then just a little list of some possible quests. Some quest threads to send you on if you're working through the academy. Then they have the same thing again for Ancient Being, for working for an aristocrat, for working for a criminal syndicate, for working for a guild, for a military force, a religious order, and a sovereign, like a king or something. So lots of options for all of them, and they all have the same level of detail and ideas as the Academy had. And then a little bit on the last page of, what if you want to be your own patron, which is more of you're playing the role where you're, if you were starting a wizard school and instead of giving you extra stuff, you get more responsibilities, but you have people that you're able to send out from that. Then we get to Chapter 3, Magical Miscellany. Just basically spells and magic items. We get a list of new spells. This is it. Which includes some things, I think like Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, were those both in Sword Coast. A few of those, because we got the Blade Dancer, Blade Singer, whatever the wizard version, that those work well with. Dream of the Blue Veil, which is a spell to transport to other material planes. So if instead of having I want a plane hopping game where we go from the material plane to the Feywild to elemental plane of fire, if you want it to be I go from Eberron to Theros to Ravnica to Taldore, you can do that with this spell. So if that's the game you want to run, which I kind of do now, you have that option. They do have some just general spells. A couple, like Intellect Fortress, seem more of the psychic flavor. Minds that are very psychic flavor. And then we get a bunch of the spells are summon spells. For example, first one is Summon Aberration. It, like the Beastmaster had a general stat block, it has a general stat block. When you summon the creature, you choose, for this one, Beholderkin, Slod, or Starspawn. One of 3 different aberrations. Some of them are 4, some are 2. But you choose one of a few different options. And within this stat block, not only does it have things like they're based on the slot level that you used for the spell. So you use a higher level spell slot, it's more powerful. But it also has things that say, if you chose Beholderkin, it has a fly speed with hover. It has regeneration if you choose the Slod form. If you have Beholderkin, it has an eye ray, Slod has claws, etc. So it's one spell that gives you a few different options that are all similar in type to, I feel like, definitely improve upon the existing summoning and conjuration options within D&D, and they have it for a lot. They have it for aberration, but they also have it for beasts, for celestials, for constructs, for elementals, for Fae, for Shadow Spawn, and for Undead. So, and each of them has multiple different groups. Like, Undead is ghostly, putrid, or skeletal. Like, what kind of Undead are you summoning, etc. There's a few Tasha's spells, just properly themed. It's Tasha's book, so we get a few spells from Tasha. And then we give personalizing spells, which is the idea of, like, this is a great example. A farmer sorcerer hurls magic missiles that look like chickens. As long as it still functions the same as magic missile, you can alter the flavor so it looks different, so that it fits your theme. And they give you, 10 example themes that you might go from. For example, food or utensils that carry the scent of cuisine from the spellcaster's homeland, if you're like a chef-based mage, or Bursts and strokes of watercolor painted by an invisible brush. Beautiful, beautiful option. But yeah, there's just things as examples and just freedom to say, have fun with it. You know, be like Caleb in Critical Role, where you're really flavoring up your spells. It's fun. And then we get magic items. Again, list of them. Several of them are magic tattoos, which are basically, they're a syringe or wand that you press against yourself, and you just hold it there while you attune, and then the syringe itself becomes the tattoo, and it like melds onto you. And you only have so much space on your body, and they cover a certain amount of space depending on their rarity. Interesting. Some of them are pretty cool. There are also a whole series of items that are like spell focuses for the different classes. So, all-purpose tool by an Artificer, Amulet of the Devout for a Cleric or Paladin, that basically are enchanted spell focuses that give you extra benefits. There are also a series of books, different magic books, many of which are spell books that can be used as the focus by a wizard. So a wizard, instead of having a wand or a staff or a component pouch, could also just pull out their book and be reading directly from their book, which is another great flavor for them. And then we have some new artifacts. Baba Yaga's Mortar and Pedestal. Again, Baba Yaga is the adopted mother of Tasha, so fits the theme. More tattoos. More artifacts. Demonomicon. They have a series of shards that basically, they're the, like, sorcerer focuses, and they give you extra benefits when you use your meta magic abilities. So there's, like, 4 here for the elemental planes, but there's also, like, Feywild and Shadowfell and Far Realm. Luba's Taroka of Souls is an artifact that is basically a tarot deck that ties into Barovia, Castle Ravenloft, Strahd. That whole setting. That gives you some interesting options there. They have Mighty Servant of Luco, another artifact that is basically an increased version of the Apparatus of Qualish to artifact level, again with its own stat block. Moonsickle as a focus for druids or rangers. We do have Prosthetic Limb, modified from where it's appeared once or twice before, requiring attunement. No longer requires attunement, because you should not have to give up one of your attunement slots to play a character that, lost a limb and has a way to get by without it, so that you can play that. You don't have to waste an attunement slot for that. We have prosthetic limbs in the real world, and you know what? You don't have to magically attune to them. So I'm glad for that. There's like a Rhythm Maker's Drum for a Bard. And this is an example, read this one. So while holding this drum, you gain bonus to spell attack rolls and the saving throw DCs of your Bard spells. General helpful, determined by the drum's rarity. And then as an action, you can play the drum to regain 1 use of your Bardic Inspiration feature. Once, can't be used again until the next dawn. Right. And then we have Teeth of Dalvernar, which is a series of teeth that has a whole chart. There are 20 of them that you basically get to pull one out of a bag, so it feels a little deck of many things-ish, and either throw it on the ground and make a creature that's an ally for a short time, or replace one of your own teeth that has to give you special abilities, some of which have drawbacks. And then we get to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is Dungeon Master's Tools. Session 0 sort of gives you the idea, first, of just, set up things for character creation. Great, very useful. But then also the social contract of playing the game, with things like soft and hard limits of subjects that are completely, do not go here, this is gonna, I can't hear about this hurts me, so it's not gonna make, the game will not be fun. Or soft limits, which are things like, if you're bringing this up, this is a heavy subject, don't do so lightly. It needs to be because it's important within the game. Which, they bring up both as far as, themes of scenes including sex, exploitation, racial profiling, slavery, violence towards children and animals, gratuitous swearing, intra-party romance, or things outside of the game, such as, like, between players, unwanted physical contact, dice sharing, dice throwing, shouting, vulgarity, rules lawyering, distracting use of cell phones, and generally disrespectful behavior. We never go over this with my friends. In general, our group doesn't really have much hard limits. We have certainly soft limits, but just, I have known them for half of my life at least. We know each other pretty well. We don't have to do a session 0 to discuss this, but I think this is a great thing to address, particularly if you're trying to game with a group of people that you're not friends with, that you're basically using the game to build friendships. This is a great thing to address, because otherwise, things can come up that, depending on certain people, like, you might not know that someone had what's in their past, or phobias, random things that, because they are who they are, it is a bigger deal to them than it makes sense to, because people are people. And you might not assume that, but good thing to address. And I'm like, okay, that's something that I don't really need to do. But if you're gaming with people you don't know, very important. Also, just game customization, going over house rules and stuff. Are we using the luck stat? Perhaps. Then we get a new section going on to Sidekicks, which expands on the Essentials Kit rulebook. It gave each of the types of sidekicks up to like level 5 or 6. This breaks them down like they are just classes, a little more blatantly. And basically there is the expert, which is like a bard or rogue kind of level character. Bard without spellcasting, I should specify. Spellcaster, which is your different casters, and warrior, which is your fighter, monk, barbarian, whatever. And basically, they can just be applied to any creature, I believe, that has a CR of 1/2 or less. The first two require them to speak a language. Warrior does not, so it can even just go to, like, if you have an animal join along your adventure. And it's basically for adding an extra character to help the party out. Whether that character is... whether it's because, you only have 1 or 2 players in your game, and you're like, you need a little extra help in fights, or to round out your party because you don't have a healer, so we'll give you a spellcaster that is a healer role in order to, facilitate that. So it just gives you some options for adding to the party, or you can just use it if you want to add an extra character, like, they have a guide for this part of the game. It's a way to kind of come up with a generic and simple stat block for them. Or if you have someone that's, say, new to the game and looks at the full classes and is just completely overwhelmed, these are a little more simpler classes that technically a player could play too. Rules on parlaying with monsters, obviously something you could always do, but it gives you a list of different types of creature, beast, celestial, construct, etc., and what skill you would likely use to think about or research or whatever to know about them. And then desires for things like, such as a fiend might desire your soul, or a desecrated holy object, or blood from a living or recently slain loved one, or breaking a sacred promise in the fiend's presence. Whereas a beast might want fresh meat, or a soothing melody. So it just sort of gives you a quick list of 4 options for the different creature types of different ways that you can try and avoid a combat and have a different kind of encounter. We move on to environmental hazards, which is basically the idea that you have a region, and when certain things happen, soon after the party first enters the region, when a creature loses more than half its hit points, when a creature casts a spell first level or higher, when you activate a magic item, when a creature makes an exceptionally loud noise, when something happens, something happens. So there are blessed radiants, so some sort of holy area, blessed area, and it could be things like aberrations, fiends, and undead in the region have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks for the next 24 hours, or one character in the region feels a profound sense of purpose and gains the benefit of the blessed spell for 1 minute. They can choose 2 other creatures they can see to gain the spell's benefit as well. So different things like that. And then there's others for like areas touched by the far realm, so weird aberration-based stuff. Haunted areas, some great feel in here. Over the next 24 hours, whenever any creature is wounded, its blood or similar fluid spreads to form short messages, or grisly tableau, or all bright light weakens to dim light for 24 hours. Sources that provide dim light, such as candles, do not shed any light. Or a violent thunderstorm begins, centered over the region. It doesn't end until the party leaves the region. So just different things to make an area feel more haunted. Again, for like infested by like insects and such. A mirror zone, which is really weird and kind of creative, and this gives the best feel for it. It's like things coming out of mirrors. Psychic resonance, which like awakens creatures and stuff. Unraveling magic, so definitely kind of like a wild magic. A magic is failing here, or being disrupted. And so there's just different ways to make different regions of your world feel unique. And then we have magical phenomena. Much like the environmental things make environments seem interesting, here are just other things, other magic influences on the world. We have different eldritch storms, so from firestorms to necrotic tempest to whatever, emotional echoes, which is just sort of things that the environment does because it has such a strong attachment to an emotion. Enchanted springs that do things like any creature that touches or drinks the water of this spring feels blessed. The creature gains the benefits of the blessed spell for 1 hour, or other benefits from being around a magical spring. Mimic or magic mushrooms, which is mushrooms that you do, like a creature can understand and speak all languages for 1d4 days, or just actual mushrooms that are magic, like actual magic, not just trippy magic. Mimic colonies, which has this crazy piece of art, which is the idea of you can bargain with a mimic. You can either be too strong for it and, or you could offer it what it wants. And here is ways that mimics work together to make, the idea here, they're on a porch that's a mimic, with a chair that's a mimic, or on chairs that are mimics, with a table that's a mimic, with a teapot that's a mimic, with cups that are mimics, with planters that are mimics. Like this here, this is the tongue of this mimic that they're inside. And different ways to interact with these colonies of mimics. Including a juvenile mimic stat block that could, say, be perhaps a familiar as an option. Just saying. So yeah, definite interesting rules there. Primal Fruit, which are, magical plants that produce fruit that is magical. Like a creature's skin prickles faintly for 1 hour. It gains resistance to 1 damage type chosen by the DM. Just trees that produce fruit that have magical effects. Unearthly Roads, which is a weird transportation method. Basically, you have to do something special in order to enter this magical method of transportation. But then these paths operate like long tunnels, and creatures that travel on an unearthly road progress 21 miles of distance in the time it would normally take to travel 1 mile. So you do something weird like spilling a pint of humanoid blood, or being the descendant of a legendary hero, and you could access this road that lets you travel faster. Weird, but okay. And then, after the magical environment stuff, there are just natural hazards. Avalanches, rules for those. Falling into water, falling onto another creature, and spell equivalents of natural hazards, which basically lists a big long list of here are natural hazards, and here are spells that you can just use the effect of the spell to make the thing. So, like, if you want to have an earthquake, you could use the spell Earthquake. Lightning could be called Lightning. Meteor could be Meteor Swarm or Fireball. But things like Radiation could be Blight or Circle of Death. A Toxic Eruption could be Acid Splash. So just different environmental effects and the spells that you can just use as the rules for them. And then the final section of the book is puzzles. Ways to add puzzles to the game. For example, this one is creature paintings, and it is a gallery with different paintings of different creatures with different number of creatures in the paintings. And the clue is, in order to gain all knowledge, one must know where to start. Count on your enemies to reveal the source of the secret. This room is dedicated to the defeat of all monsters here within. And so, like, if there are 3 gnolls, you have to count G and O to figure out O is the letter you need, and then you find, basically, you are counting through the name of the creature to find a letter to figure out the letters to arrange to make Owlbear, which is the secret password for whatever you need. A lot of the puzzles in here, not all of them, but a lot of them require you to figure out a word. Like it's a painting of gnolls. Gnolls is pretty easy. And figure out which letter from that word to use to come up with another word. That is used a lot. And there's some other options too. And it's not all bad. Some of the things in here are actually pretty cool. But that is... I have players that can't spell. Of my 4 most, players I play with most, one of them can spell decent. The other 2 of them, not at all. And the other, probably around my level of less than average. So that's not the best for them. But of all things, I think all but one of them has extra ways to customize the spell, or the puzzle rather, such as just, instead of being monsters, it could be, members of obvious professions, objects, like distinctive objects, anything that could logically be in a group, basically. Like, you can just change it up to be whatever. And there are also hint checks. The idea of, through an intelligence investigation or wisdom perception check, they can get clues. Now, that is the way that they end up really finding out what they're needing here. Now, one of my players pointed out, well, where did that jump in logic come from? From the hint. But it does make it where it's sort of a combination of your character has to have some skill base in order to get through it, and then you have to, finish it up. But there are a number of others. I'll skip through and say, but there are handouts in the back for several of them. And that finishes there. There are puzzles. There's like, whatever, there's a handful of them. I don't want to show them because, just like showing a riddle, which one of them involves riddles, you know, you see it, you know the answer, it's spoiled and cannot be of any fun. I'll just say they are my least favorite part of this book is the puzzles. But the idea of building puzzles that have built-in hint checks so that the characters can know things and give hints to the players to help solve it, that is a good idea. The overall function of it is good. They excessively rely on the need for spelling and counting number of letters. It's not great. There's one that's pattern recognition. Like I said, one that's riddles. A couple that are using those handouts and basically tracing lines on the handouts to figure out, you know, different things. Those are interesting. One that's basically a word search turned into a dungeon floor room. Yeah, so there's a handful of puzzles. Don't want to spoil those, as much of the book is designed for players. It's that last section it's not. And I like the book. The puzzles are alright. The rest of the book is awesome. All the cool character options are great. And while when I first saw the Barbarian, just like, you're just adding extra features? I'm actually cool with it. I'm like, yeah, I'll probably allow those in my games. Yeah. Why not? The Patron section is similar to the Eberron one that I wasn't very interested in, but slightly better. I suppose by slightly better what I mean is a bit easier to just pull parts of it off of it to use. Getting some extra feats is great. Extra spells, fun. Magic items, wonderful, love. So, yeah. Tasha's Cauldron of everything. It's also really nice just to have another really broad rules expansion to the game. It's been a bit. And I will link down below where you can check it out online, or of course pick it up from your friendly local gaming store. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff that helps me out so much. Thank you for watching. Bye.